This vision of fundamental discreteness was opposed by Parmenides, who said that the nothingness which the Pythagoreans supposed to exist between things is unthinkable, and because it cannot be thought of, it does not exist. Whatever is, simply is. And since we can't conceive of non-being, it is impossible that a thing could come into being from non-being. The startling conclusion of this line of thought is that there is no such thing as change.
Whatever can be spoken or thought of necessarily is, since it is possible for it to be. But it is not possible for nothing to be, for never shall this be proved, that there be things that are not.
Parmenides was a native of Elea in the south of Italy, and a primary figure in what came to be known as the Eleatic school. Parmenides argued that what we perceive as movement and change is actually an illusion, and that reality is the one, unchangeable, and invisible being.
What is, being ungenerated, is also imperishable, whole of a single kind, immovable and complete. Nor was it once, nor will it be, since it is now, altogether one and continuous.
Zeno was a disciple of Parmenides and led the defense of his master's philosophy against the criticisms of his contemporaries. To demonstrate that the Eleatic notion of the one was at least as defensible as the Pythagorean worldview, he contrived a series of paradoxes that seemed to highlight the contradictory nature of movement.
Perhaps the most striking paradox is the paradox that we can't leave the spot where we are now, because in order to even get as far as the door, we would first have to go halfway, then half the remaining distance, or even worse, in order to get even halfway, we'd first have to go a quarter way, and before that an eighth of the way. This goes on ad infinitum. How could you possibly finish going right through a more than finite number of distances? You can't, and so you can't reach any distance, however close. This was his paradox, and it was still worrying people like Bertrand Russell in the 20th century, and indeed worries us now in the 21st century.
If there is a multiplicity of things, it is necessary that these should be just as many as exist, and not more nor fewer. If there are just as many as there are, then the number would be finite. If there is a multiplicity at all, the number is infinite, for there are always others between any two, and yet others between each pair of these. So the number of things is infinite.
In his rebuttal, Aristotle came up with a conception of infinity that is still taught in schools today.
Aristotle's idea is that there is infinity, all right, but infinity is not a more than finite number of anything. No, to talk of infinity is to talk of an ever-expandable finitude. In his view, there is an infinite number of half-distances between here and the door, only in a restricted sense, that however large a finite number of distances you have marked out in your thought, or even by some physical marking, you can always mark out a larger finite number. This finitude is ever expandable, but it always remains a finitude. And so we are not required to cross a more than finite number of distances.